is a new India? What does it require? What does it mean? And how do we build it from ground up? Let us hear it from the former Water Secretary and Sanitation Specialist, Parameswaran Iyer, and former Chief Election Commissioner and a member of the International Elections Advisory Council, S.Y. Quraishi. They're going to talk to author and senior journalist Kaveri Bamzai.
Mr. Quraishi, may I ask you, really, what is at the core of being an IAS officer in India? What is the most fundamental thing that an IAS officer in India has to know?
You know, IAS is a very unique institution for which we should thank Sardar Patel as much as we can because he realized its vision and its importance. And there are various things which are unique about it. Number one, it is an all-India service like the IPS and the Indian Forest Service, which means a service which is common to the entire country. For a country like India, a federal country, this was extremely important. Like take the case of Parameswaran Iyer himself. He is from Tamil Nadu, but at the age of 21, he moved to UP, forgot about his Tamil language, he picked up Hindi and he spent next 40-50 years in UP. It could have been in Punjab, it could have been in Nagaland. It's not a small sacrifice. Now people are allotted to different states, and which is what is keeping the country united. If you see what happened, the happenings in Assam in the 80s, in Punjab, in Kashmir, it is the outsiders. You know, the inside officers may still get influenced or pressurized. It is the outsiders who keep the flag of India flying. One should never undervalue that. Secondly, you know, when I was preparing for the IAS and about to join service, we still had the same debate, Technocrat versus Generalist. Now, I think it is a myth, it is a misnomer. We are Technocrats. We are a specialist. We are a specialist of public administration. Now, MBA is the specialist for private sector. We are a specialist to manage the public sector. And we get 2 years of intensive training, mind you. It is not just that through an exam we suddenly become experts of all. Thirdly, the fact that we come from a cross-section, now even engineers, doctors, IT professionals, everybody, they're all coming, and then they're given training to run the administration, particularly the district. Now, unlike any other post, where nobody wants to go to the backward area, this is the biggest pleasure of an IAS officer to be posted to the most backward district in the country, because that is something which he tries to change the face of, and he will talk about it for the rest of his or her life. So, and finally, I would say that another uniqueness of the IAS is we never go stale. Because every 2-3 years, 5 years, or even 6 months, if we take UP, we are on a new job. And we have to learn the new job. And with the result, we never go stale. And obviously, if you are head of a department of agriculture, animal husbandry, and then to IT, and then third day to industry, you cannot remain ignorant. You have to lead from the front. So you have to pick up the job very quickly, which is what we all do, which is what keeps us all thriving and kicking, because we are always learning. We are always learning.
Right. Mr. Iyer, I'll come to you because there's a very interesting idea that Mr. Quraishi said, you know, the debate of the technocrat versus the generalist. In your book, you talk about choosing to stay on in, you know, in UP and in Lucknow in particular, because you got so involved in the Swajal program. And later that really became your specialization. And we all know that you were able to effect a remarkable behavioral change in the Swachh Bharat mission. So talk a little about that decision. I found that very intriguing. As a young person in UP, you discovered this passion for sanitation and water when it wasn't even fashionable. Talk about that.
Sure. No, thanks, Kaveri. And you know, as Dr. Quraishi has said, I think there's no question that, and I fully agree with him, that the specialization of IAS officers is actually general administration, district administration, development administration, because that's what we do for the first 10, 15 years of our career. And I think we have serious comparative advantage in that. Now, so that happened to me as well. And as you've read the book, you'll see I kind of stumbled into a specialization. That's the way I put it, because I was transferred from Bijnor Again, I was there for a year, and I was removed. I thought I was doing well. I was a little disappointed to be posted to Lucknow, and then I was posted to rural development, which in UP is not the most glamorous of departments. You'd rather be in finance or in a sort of industries or better department. So when I went there, I was suddenly given this portfolio of rural water and sanitation. There was a World Bank project starting to be developed, and my boss, Mr. Harish Gupta, one of the most outstanding officers in UP, and I think a batchmate of Dr. Quraishi, who had given me that portfolio. So I initially thought, what is water and sanitation? Doesn't sound very exciting. And then as we started developing this program jointly with the World Bank, I realized it was a fascinating field and sector. This is about community empowerment, giving women leadership roles. And I got really interested in this Swajal program, which we developed. This was in the mid 90s. And then I realized that, this is where I can contribute a lot, use all my earlier field experience to really make an impact. And in fact, as I've written in the book, I was given the opportunity to go as district magistrate of a Kawal town, as we call it in UP, one of the big five.
Right.
And my wife had just got posted to Lucknow as Assistant Commissioner of Income Tax. And I was really interested in this sector. So I just decided to stay on. And since it wasn't much in demand, there was no push factor to get me out. I stayed on, and I really sort of developed, a very, very sort of good understanding, but fascination with the sector of both water and sanitation. So that's how I got into it. But as I've also said in the book, and so I've got not a different take, but I feel that with Dr. Quraishi, but I feel that after 10 to 15 years of service, I think it is useful for young IAS officers who have got a particular preference or experience with a particular sector or depth of knowledge to start thinking about a broad area of expertise, whether it's the social sector, whether it's industries or economic management or regulation. I think that in today's world, it's probably useful to have a little more domain knowledge than we traditionally have. I mean, there are so many IAS officers, for example, Dr. Quraishi himself, he's one of the foremost election management experts in the world.
Exactly.
Right? And apart from the other things he's done. So I think that, it's whether it's by, typically in my case, it happened by accident, but I think increasingly the government, and I know the academy is doing this as well, including the Department of Personnel, I think they're starting to think towards getting people who are interested in particular sectors to start specializing, if that's the right word, or spending a little more time in a particular broad area. So that's what I feel. And it happened to me, and that's how I got into water and sanitation.
Yeah, and you've done remarkably well, as we know. Dr. Quraishi, may I come back to you and ask about the whole idea of the DM? How important is the DM? Mr. Iyer writes very well about, being DM of Bijnor and all the challenges that he had to face. And also then later discovering that these DMs were key to the Swachh Bharat program because they were the people on the ground and they had to be first evangelized in a way before he could actually reach out to, people in the villages. How important is the DM and how important are those years for a young IAS officer?
No, DM undoubtedly is the backbone of Indian administration. For the simple reason that in the district, everything under the sun comes under the charge of the DM. Now, of course, since there are so many subjects and we have our individual preferences, I opted for focus on education, for instance. There are people who focus on industry, the Param focus on sanitation. So there are so many areas to focus on. Not that you have to neglect all other sectors. You have to contribute everywhere, everything which is assigned to you, you have to fulfill. On top of that, you have to do something additional. And so much so that, in fact, I remember one of my seniors and idols in civil service, Mr. S.K. Misra. He said, look, the government will take work out of you. And you claim to be blue-blooded IAS officers and brilliant people. Unless you leave a mark, leave a legacy on the job, you're not fit to be called an IAS. Therefore, it has been my belief and my practice that I should leave any chair, any post better than I had found it. And this is besides doing it, it is not by neglecting the normal activities that the government will batter you into delivering anyway. But on top of that, your additional idea that where you can make a difference, and that is something which that we do in the district, and it keeps us going for the rest of our civil service career. DMship is the best memories of our life, because it gave you the world of opportunities, and an opportunity to try your own instinct, your own um, capabilities and your preferences, and then deliver and make a mark. So that is the backbone. And if I may give an example, for instance, election. The biggest management event of the world is the election.
Yeah.
And 90 countries rolled into one is the size of our election.
Yeah.
Now, the same bureaucracy, which is contemptuously called babus, or sometimes inefficient, lazy, and corrupt, when they come under the election commission, and about 60% of our IAS, IPS work directly under us, they deliver a zero-error election every time. You know, and there again, the backbone is the DMs and the SPs.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we have to deliver through them, and they do a fantastic job. We're giving the leadership, we have to give them protection, and those who are not honest, we know how to identify them and isolate them.
Right.
But once we have chosen them, we back them to the hilt, and we make them deliver, and they do and they bring pride to the country.
And we've seen in the recent US elections what can happen if you don't have such an infrastructure in place. You can take days counting votes, as opposed to how efficiently it's done in India. I think it's quite remarkable, isn't it? We underplay the importance and the efficiency of our own election commission, I think.
In fact, it is important to remind that Hillary Clinton once publicly in a public meeting described India's election as a gold standard for the world.
Yeah.
I had set up in my time an institute in the election commission called India International Institute of Democracy and Election Management on the top floor of the election commission. And do you know, in 6 years, 85 countries have trained from us.
Wow.
And from most countries, the entire entire commission and the top management has come and learned from us. We have become a Jagat Guru, and all that has been achieved by our bureaucracy.
Right.
Whom we, media particularly is condemning all the time.
Yeah.
Not you, Kaveri.
But Mr. Iyer, let's go back to this whole idea of, in a way, elections also, we moved from paper ballots to EVMs. That was also a behavioral change. And of course, in your case, the Swachh Bharat triumph was entirely behavioral change. Getting 500 million people to change the way they look at sanitation is not easy. So what are the things that you brought to the table, which you had, trained, which you trained for, which the IAS had trained you for?
Sure. Kaveri, as Dr. Quraishi mentioned, the DM, the district magistrate, as he's known in UP by other names, collector, deputy commissioner, they're really the backbone of administration in India. Each one of them is managing on average of 2.5 million people. It's huge, right?
Yeah.
And so that responsibility, that leadership you're thrust into at a very young age by any young collector, that makes a phenomenal difference in terms of responsibility, leadership, innovation, and tackling major problems and solving them.
Right.
So I think that experience stands everyone in very good stead. And in fact, in the Swachh Bharat mission, we use that formula, which we're kind of used to in the UP cadre, but every cadre talks about it. The formula is PM, CM, DM. Right? Prime Minister, Chief Minister, District Magistrate.
Right.
I learned about that when I was a young private secretary in the government of India.
Yeah.
And there was someone who worked with Mr. VP Singh. He was Defense Minister. I was PS to Mr. Arun Singh.
Arun Singh, yes. Yeah.
And this gentleman said, "Saab, aap Delhi itne jaldi kyun aa gaye the? India mein to keval 3 hi job hote hain, PM, CM, DM, which matter." And he reminded me that, and of course I went back to UP and did my district. But I think that is a pivotal role.
Right.
But I've also got to say that in the Swachh Bharat mission, in terms of that behavior change, which really became a Jan Andolan, I've got to give the full credit to the Prime Minister, to be absolutely frank. And I think Dr. N.C. Saxena talks about it in his book as well, where it's that political leadership which really made this program succeed. So, for example, sanitation had been going on for a long time in India. And what we learned from our experience, and which 55 sanitation ministers from around the world learned, the Secretary General came for our first conference. We spoke about the 4 Ps.
Yeah.
The first P is political leadership.
Hmm.
This was the first time that the Prime Minister of India was talking about sanitation and toilets in his first address from the Red Fort on August 15, 2014. That was a game changer.
Yeah.
Then it was public financing. More than $20 billion, about 1.3 lakh crores were invested in sanitation, something which no other country had ever thought of, right? The finance minister has got scarce resources, but under the sort of guidance of the Prime Minister, they allocated funds for a public good like sanitation, which was critical. The third was partnerships. How do you partner with grassroots organizations, with international development organizations, with NGOs, with the media? And I think, as Dr. Quraishi has spoken, the media was on the whole quite supportive of the Swachh Bharat mission.
Yeah.
Obviously, there were problems and there were criticisms. And the fourth was people's participation. So how did we get people to participate? We had 600,000, 6 lakh plus Swachhagrahis on the ground.
Yeah.
And Dr. Quraishi said Haryana was doing tremendously well, where Swachhagrahis on the ground were motivating communities, triggering behavior change, getting women involved, and it became a friendly competition. And then, of course, as you said, for the young collectors, we had to motivate and incentivize them, get them excited about the Swachh Bharat mission, to feel part of a national program. And there was a friendly competition as well, where they were competing to make their districts and even states open defecation free. And then finally, we supported the collectors by giving each one of them a young professional whom we call the Zilla Swachh Bharat Preraks.
Right.
So we had a partnership with the Tata Trust. They gave us these young professionals who became the eyes and ears of district magistrates, so that the collector had a person on the ground who was running the program on his or her behalf, and so that they could actually then steer the program accordingly. So no question, the collectors played a big role, and it was important to get them into the program, have a buzz, and make them excited about it.
Dr. Quraishi, you also are part of the Cluster Innovation Center, and I think there you do a lot of teaching and mentoring of young people in innovative practices. What are the innovative practices that you have sort of picked up through your very long and distinguished career? There's a very interesting anecdote that Mr. Iyer refers to in his book, where he talks about how Arun Singh scolded him because he wasn't taking notes, and how that convinced him after that, and he made sure that he would always have either his notepad or his iPad, because he told him, you obviously have a remarkable memory, and you can remember everything that I've told you. But what are the things that sometimes the political leadership teaches you, and you can actually take that forward? That was one question. And the second question was, of course, about the innovative practices, which we'll also come to Mr. Iyer about. So talk a little about how political leadership sometimes can be, quite good.
Now, two things. But before that, I was in the Cluster Innovation Center of Delhi University just for 1 year. But somehow it has continued to be on the internet as my biodata, and moved on to various other things. But that is not to bring down the importance of Cluster Innovation Center, and probably it has ceased to function also. But I will talk about the importance of innovation.
Yeah.
And I have noticed from the beginning, because of the inspiration and the talk which Mr. S.K. Misra gave me in the very first year of joining the service in Haryana, that each one of us has a capability of producing something unique, something original, innovate. So innovation, and every post, I don't want to start counting everything, because that will be embarrassing, talking about your personal achievement. But from my very first posting, just for example, where Sonipat subdivision, where all the vegetables to Delhi come from Sonipat and the other surrounding district. So there was since the vegetables and fruit are perishable, there was no cooperative society for them. I set up a cooperative society. I opened a shop in the mandi, and there was an agitation by the mandi people against me, and even a threat to my life in the time of Mr. Bansilal. the threat to my life. And but that thing survived for the 40 years. I don't know whether it's still there or not. But just to give an example, even very early on, you are able to innovate. It is entirely up to you because the sky is the limit. And I'll come to the latest election commission. I was the 17th chief election commissioner. We have had 6 after that. I'll talk of 4 innovations which I did because I had the power. Only thing is, all IAS officers should be made to understand that if you have the power, you must use it. Why are you shy? Why are you reticent? For instance, there used to be 3 joint secretary jobs. I created 4 more because there was nothing to stop me. And what did I create them for? I set up a voter education division, and which has brought about participation revolution. You know, and interestingly, in 2006, when I was the junior most commissioner, but a communication PhD, when I saw 20%, 24% turnout in some district, I said we must have voter education. At that time, I was advised, okay, no, you do it in your time. Educating voters is not your job. I said it is very much our job, because when there is low turnout and you win an election with 10% vote, you are not representing 90%. So it raises a question of your legitimacy as a representative, right? So I set up voter education division. I set up an expenditure monitoring division, which after which we started seizing money, 2,000-3,000 crores we have seized and all that. Is a history. Of course, and in my book, An Undocumented Wonder, The Making of the Great Indian Election, I documented 40 modus operandi of abuse of power, money power, cheating. And how to stop that. Of course, they have now innovated more in the problem per se. I started National Voters Day. Again, you have to be responsive. I was in Odisha, Bhubaneswar, talking to a civil society meeting about 50, 60 people. Somebody from the audience raised his hand and he said 18 years is an age to celebrate. I said, that's a very good statement. Let us think of a celebration. Within a week, we came out with the world's biggest youth empowerment program, the National Voters Day. That everybody who will become 18 on 1st of January, we identified them. In fact, if you allow me, since you're talking of bureaucracy, and this will be interesting for Param also, we decided that we will celebrate 25th January, which is the Founders' Day of Election Commission, a day before India became a republic, we were founded. So we will celebrate it as National Voters' Day. So, and we will look for those who will become 18 by 1st of January, and in 800,000 8 lakh functions across the country, वहाँ new voters को हम card दे देंगे. I wrote a letter to the then Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Chandrasekhar, that Cabinet Secretary, we are going to celebrate National Voters Day, 8 lakh functions organize करेंगे. I request you to please inform all the states and the ministries to give us cooperation. It's a normal courtesy letter which Param is also aware of. Now, September, October, November, December gone. 19th of January, 6 days before the event, I get a call from Chandrasekhar. Quraishi, your proposal for National Voters Day is coming before the cabinet. The moment he used the word proposal, my heart sank. Damn it, I have already achieved it. I'm, all made all the arrangements, and you're calling it a proposal. And what if this proposal is rejected? So he said, I have to ask you 2 questions. I said, tell me what. He said, number 1, do you want a national holiday? I said, no, I don't. He said, how much money do you want? I said, I don't want a single rupee. He says, what, are you mad? You say you're going to organize 8 lakh functions and you don't want any money. I said, I'm not mad, and I know because registering voters is my job anyway. I do it round the year. I'm just converting it into an event for a larger impact. No one. This must be the only proposal in India's history which was passed in the cabinet without a cabinet memorandum. And how complicated cabinet memorandum process is, maybe Param will tell you. So innovation, and I had also mentioned to you about the institute, IIIDEM, which I set up with a lot of criticism. 85 countries have trained from us beside our own 11 million people. It is basically for our own people. But the fact that we became our soft power, we became a flagship for democracy worldwide. Now, all this was possible. It was within our powers. I just dared to use it. Others are reticent and not so rash. So I wish they could all be so bold.
Can we talk a little about political leadership? How important is that?
Very, very good point. In fact, from our academy days in 1971, this was one thing which we were taught to us very sensitively, our relations with the politician. Oh, they will always be in conflict. You will always be in conflict. But my own experience, I was the district magistrate or the deputy commissioner of Gurgaon. And I found that 95% of the time, there is no clash with the politician. So 5% are the clash areas. And so my solution to both of them, my response to both of them was like this, that wherever there is the likely conflict, all you need to improve is your communication. Suppose a minister says, you have dismissed the sarpanch, suspended the sarpanch, and he's my man. And so just go back to him with all the information. Hey, sir, your sarpanch has committed so many offenses and he is doing so much of bribery and corruption and he's making you unpopular. So 9 times out of 10, he will say, "Acha, ek juta meri taraf se mujhe marna," because you communicated. Now, if you dismiss him from the beginning, that's not okay. Communicate with him. And 95% of the time, they also want good work. Now, Param did a fantastic work, but he's not going to stand in election. The benefit will be coming to the political leadership who gave him all the support. So when we are working in the administration and doing good job, why should the politician be jealous of us? He is actually most honest politicians actually get IAS officers posted in their district and subdivisions because they know that these youngsters are the guys who can deliver. And if you see, there are 2-3 the Twitter handle of IAS at work and DC of IAS. You see every day, somebody or the other is doing fantastic work. And have you seen any instance when an IAS and an officer is transferred from the district and people cry, or there is a demonstration, they don't want him or her to go, and this only happens for the IAS officers, because they are doing such good work that people start loving them and they don't want them to go. So I think there's a politician and civil servant relationship is a bit exaggerated, but it is not to deny that it doesn't exist. In UP, for instance, the average tenure of a DM or SP is 4 to 5 months. Most of them live out of their suitcases. And now initially I may be brave, no, I don't care. If they transfer me, they transfer me. But 2 transfers and my back will be broken. Because every time I have to withdraw my children from school and get them admission with, you have to go and beg the principals of the school to please take my children. So it disturbs the family life and they understand that. They use transfer as a weapon. And to say, no, don't be bothered about transfer, I think it is easier said than done. So either best is that, okay, get transferred to the state capital where the clash with politicians is minimal and forget about your dream tenure in the district or subdivision.
Right. Mr. Iyer, what do you have to say to that? The whole idea of transfer being used as a weapon, and does that sometimes cow down youngsters who really want to do things? Does that disappoint them? Does that make them disheartened?
Yeah, look, as Dr. Quraishi said, and he's one of the persons all of us have looked up to and been inspired by. It is a challenge. There are situations on the ground where you get into conflicts despite best efforts, and I fully agree about the need to communicate, and it makes a lot of difference. Now, in UP, for example, traditionally, the tenures of district collectors and officers has been less stable than in other states. Having said that, I worked for a year in Bijnor, which was above the average, as you mentioned by Dr. Quraishi. And I was a little disappointed when I was transferred from Bijnor because, we were in the midst of the total literacy campaign and it was going pretty well. And so I was transferred to Lucknow. And, but as it turned out, I think one of the qualities of an IAS officer, you always kind of land on your feet.
Right.
And so when I reached Lucknow and, I was in rural development, so I kind of seized that moment, right? And I think that's one of the things coming out in my book, Carpe Diem, right? You seize opportunities which come to you. I think we get a lot of opportunities in the civil service and we need to, see what is our area of interest and never let those opportunities go by. So, and that's how the Swajal program started. So, I think transfers are a kind of part of life for us and we've got to go with the flow. Sometimes it can be a little demoralizing, But I strongly believe that, you've got to make the most of the moment. You've got to seize the opportunity. And I took it with both hands and sort of got into the water and sanitation sector. And similarly, I was incredibly lucky later in my second insider stint
Yeah.
to be recalled to the government of India. I feel that it was, there was something working out there. In my wildest dreams, I never thought I would come back. When I heard the Prime Minister talking about, toilets, the indignity of women and girls who have to go out in the open, and how he was going to make India open defecation free by that symbolic date of 2nd October 2019, Gandhiji's 150th. I remember telling my wife in Vietnam, I don't know what I'm doing out here. I wish I were back. And somehow it happened 15 months later. And so so all of us, I think, in the service, whichever profession you are, I feel that there are moments when, things happen to you and you've got to seize the moment. I mean, Dr. Quraishi has been an education specialist, but he transformed the work of the Election Commission. And I remember that communication outreach called SWEEP, which he initiated about voter education. Now, if he hadn't been there, it probably wouldn't have happened. So I think we get a chance, and most of us seize the opportunity. But I think that's something which we need to remember. Wherever you are, you can make a big difference. You've got to go with the flow and take it as it comes, I believe, because there are going to be twists and turns in everyone's career. And I think rather than worry about it too much, treat it as an exciting journey and seize the moment.
Yeah, and I think you've done that really well. How did your experience in the civil service enrich your experience at the World Bank?
Sure. So, that field experience, there's really no substitute for having that grassroots experience, which we get both as subdivisional magistrates, as collectors, as chief development officers. So when and because I had that experience at the grassroots level in the Swajal project in the mid 90s, I think that gave me the comparative advantage of doing really well in the World Bank, because typically in the bank, you have some very bright people. A lot of them are PhDs from, renowned universities. They have very good academic backgrounds and they have good domain knowledge, but they don't have that much of field experience. And I think it's that combination of field experience along with that domain knowledge which makes a big difference. So coming into the bank, my experience of having developed and led a grassroots community-led water and sanitation program, which was then very much in vogue internationally, what is known as the demand responsive approach, and making the users, communities, especially women, take charge of their own destiny and manage their own systems. We had done that for 4 years in the Swajal project in the hills of UP and a little bit in Bundelkhand. So that experience was extremely handy. And so when I came in, initially I was a little fazed by all the PhDs and all that intellectual talk, if you like. But very soon I realized, and everyone realized, that the experience counts. So as I started acquiring that kind of global knowledge, which is really important, and I think that's one thing the World Bank does very well, because it's not just a money bank, it's a knowledge bank. Okay. And that bringing together of knowledge and experiences and cultures from across the world, that really enriches you both in terms of your work, but also in terms of the cultural environment. So working initially in India, then working in Washington, working in Africa, working in China. I did a lot of work on China. It gives you that international exposure. But my experience in government always helped me. So for example, when I was in China, and when the county magistrate knew that I used to be a district magistrate, you strike that rapport with your client counterpart. Similarly, in other countries, whether it was in Bangladesh or even in Pakistan, where you swap stories about, your days as a collector, as an administrator, I think you strike a rapport, and that sort of enhances your ability to engage effectively with your client.
Right. Dr. Quraishi, you agree with that, this experience really serves you at a global level, and you've also interacted with the best in the world in making elections work elsewhere as well. How has that informed your experience?
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with him. Nationally, particularly, you're never an outsider or a stranger. If suppose your car breaks down, all you need to do ring up the collector, and suddenly you will have 2 cars, and then all kinds of hospitality wherever. And even post-retirement till today, for me or for my family, if we inform the collector, they go out of the way. But unlike the Param's experience of the counterparts in other countries, we haven't, I didn't come across that kind of thing, because our interaction with civil servants was not so much.
Right.
Well, mostly it was with the election managers, and election managers in most countries are not civil servants. They used to be surprised that in India, we can deliver a neutral and fair election through civil service. And I used to tell them that only we trust the civil servant, because for one reason, that they are professionals, political government come and go. And secondly, for a practical reason, that a civil servant, we have him by the neck for the next 35 years. He knows that if he misbehaves and we put him on notice, or we take action, well, his career will be jeopardized, which is why they do not try to act smart with us. They tried to initially, but once they've seen that these guys are smarter and older and gray-haired, so they fall in line, and they behave, and they give you the best possible election. Right. So internationally, our unique experience of using the civil service. In Pakistan, for instance, they use judiciary. Oh. I remember one chief election commissioner who was a judge of has been judge, governor, everything. And he used to come and started calling me beta. He used to take copious note like a student, how India does it. So मैंने कहा कि साहब आपकी problem ये कि although you have two advantages, you are from judiciary, and judiciary has more respect than bureaucracy. Right. Secondly, we are recruited, we are appointed by the government of the day. You are appointed through a collegium system with leader of opposition signing, so your credibility is more. So what is holding you back? Go ahead and do it. He says कि साहब हमको election का experience नहीं है. Obviously, judiciary को election का experience नहीं होता. हमको है. हमने पहले दिन से as ACUT, I was a presiding officer of a single booth. Right. My training trainer, DC Miti Ashu Goswami, God bless him, he passed away. There were election in 1972, and while my batchmates were posted as supervisors here, then big officers, he posted me as a presiding officer of a single booth where normally school teachers are appointed. I was very upset and in Karnal district in 1972, and I was very upset. And to add to my discomfiture, there was a story floating around that in the previous election, one presiding officer forgot to bring his rubber stamp along with the kit, and he ran 12. He was so scared, he ran 12 kilometers to fetch that stamp with those comforting thoughts. I became a presiding officer. But that is an experience. Because then the collector says कि बेटा, this is the only time जब तुम अपने हाथ से काम करोगे. बड़ा अफसर तो तुमने जिंदगी भर रहना है. अभी हाथ से काम करोगे तो ये. So when I became the election commissioner, I sought him out. He was in Delhi living a retired life. I was out of touch. I called him up. मैंने कहा सर आपकी foresight 36 साल पहले के आपने मुझे ये experience दिया, and I felt that I had an advantage over even my counterpart commissioners. Because I had been a presiding officer. I don't know whether Param has worked as a presiding officer or not. He was always have been an observer and a supervisor.
No, he's been down a manhole as well. I think he must have done it at some point. But
no, we need the answer from him. Have you?
Yeah. No, sir, no, I've not been a presiding officer. I've been a returning officer for 423 Masuri in the assembly elections.
Yeah. That is the point. In presiding officer, koi nahi hota.
Yes, sir. You're right.
Great. So before we go, of course, I'd like to again recommend and commend to everyone both your books. I think they're quite remarkable reads and readable reads. I'd like to ask you, what is the one piece of advice you'd like to give any young person who wants to join the civil service? First of all, why should any young person join the civil service? Mr. Iyer?
Sure. Look, I think it's a fascinating career, and it's the ability to have impact on the ground at scale, which puts it in a completely unique space. And, I can say without hesitation that even though I'm supposed to be a domain expert in water and sanitation and having worked internationally, if I hadn't been in the IAS, didn't know the system, didn't have the networks, I wouldn't have been half as effective working with the state governments, with chief secretaries, with collectors. So there's no question about that. And so I think that the ability to have impact, to make a difference, is unparalleled in the civil service and in the IAS. And we have heard so much from Dr. Qureshi about his experiences. Every IAS officer goes through a remarkable journey, and it's that ability, that opportunity to really transform the lives of people on the ground, to make a difference in whether it's a social sector or any sector. You can see results. You can do a lot of good in the lives of poor people. And I think that's completely unique. I don't think there's any other job in the world which gives you that opportunity. And so I think that's the reason why it's great to join the IAS. It's tough to get in. If you get in, you've got to be quite lucky, like I was. But if you get in, you can do a transformational job, and you can make a big difference in the lives of people.
Absolutely. Dr. Qureshi?
Yeah, and I entirely agree with what Param said, 100%. I will only add that the variety of experiences that this service gives you, which is what I initially said, that it keeps you on your toes and you have to keep learning. And that is why you never go stale. That is the important thing. And when I'm asked this question, and every week a couple of civil servant aspirants come to me seeking some advice, I always tell them, given another option, I will still opt for the IAS with all its constraints and problems. And in fact, I'd like to ask Param, if he's given the option of joining the World Bank or IAS, what will you opt for?
IAS, so therefore, without any doubt.
Now, secondly, now when he said he was lucky to make it, of course, we were all very lucky to make it. But I don't think we should just put it down to luck. The fact that 1 million people compete for 300 posts.
Wow.
So obviously the ones who are chosen are the best. And after that, to doubt their ability and to raise questions, I have noticed even from the media, those who are critical of the IAS, the first question I asked them, did you ever try for the IAS and fail? So if you tried and failed, you have no business to comment on the IAS.
Is it still the steel spine of India, Dr. Qureshi?
Well, it is in the sense that, in fact, Prime Minister Modi has demonstrated it. Yeah, his individual style of working, some people may be critical of that. The fact that it isn't bureaucracy, which is standing by, the quiet, faithless bureaucracy, which is doing all the solid work. Now, after all, who did this Aadhaar thing? R.S. Sharma. But you know it by Nandan Nilekani. Now, one thing which I have noticed that, people from outside, if it is Korean or Sridharan and Nandan Nilekani, you bend over backwards to accommodate them, whatever they wish. And a poor IS officer, if he wants something, even a peon, you don't give him with dignity. So now you have allowed them to work beyond 60 years, 70 years, 80 years. Now, whereas an IS officer in UP is there for 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. Now, what do you expect? In any case, the stability, the respect, the support, if you give each one of us, and or at least majority of us are capable of making a difference. You just have to give them the right environment, and as I proved from the election, given their environment, same bureaucracy. You call them names, but they deliver.
Yeah.
No, not because they love us, because we know how to use our danda also, and also persuade them, and how to select them, choose the good ones from the bad ones. So, and all that, after all, these are our skills, and that makes us a specialist and technocrat. So we should remember that after all, we are quality people if we have come through a national competition.
Yeah. And Mr. Iyer, now, are you an insider, an outsider, or an insider? What are you right now?
In fact, Kaveri, that whole subtitle came to me, originally because, as Dr. Qureshi mentioned, when you're allotted to a state cadre, you either get into the insider quota or the outsider quota. So that was a sort of, the context. For me, of course, being an insider, outsider is reference to government.
Yes.
I was an insider, and then I was an outsider. And apart from being in the World Bank, I think perhaps my most interesting outsider experience was being road manager and coach to my daughter, who's a tennis professional. That was a fascinating very, very enriching experience.
That
Then
was
I
2 years, sir, wasn't it?
That was for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, I was insider number 2 when I came back. Now I guess I'm an outsider again. I'm outside the government, and I'm an insider in the World Bank. I'm back in the World Bank in Washington in the water practice.
Right.
But I think that, frankly, this experience of being in and out, firstly, as Dr. Qureshi very correctly mentioned, having both insiders and outsiders in a particular cadre is a fantastic idea, because that's actually integration at a national level on the ground, where you've got people from different states coming together. But I think the experience of working inside and outside government is a very, very enriching one as well.
Right.
And it gives you a completely different perspective when you're outside. And then you come back, you can bring in those insights. It helps to enhance your effectiveness inside government. And I think that, that's an experience which would be sort of many young officers in whichever sectors they are, whether it's in the government or young professionals. I think it's quite useful to go outside, in a sense, your comfort zone, acquire a new experience, and if you like, come back. So I think this kind of experience is only to the good. And I feel we should see more and more of this, because it enhances both the effectiveness in government as well as the experience outside the government.
Right. And I love that Mr. Nipin Mishra, when you came back, said that he's come back to do some real work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, he was a very, very, he gave me some phenomenal advice, became a big mentor, but, that was quite a telling remark.
Yes. Dr. Qureshi, you had something to say?
No, I have a question for Paraman in all seriousness. In the context of insider outsider, he is a Tamil person who came to Hindi speaking UP at the age of 21. I really want to ask you whether you have forgotten your Tamil and whether your children speak Tamil. No, that is the sacrifice which the service officers make.
So you're spot on. You're spot on. Actually, to be frank, my Tamil was never very strong to start with, but I was the way I got into UP, as you said, was very interesting. So my father, who was an Indian Air Force officer, now at the ripe age of 91, he's still the running air marshal. That time he was a group captain commanding a Air Force station in Chakeri near Kanpur. And I was doing the exam then. We were sitting in his office, and I had to fill in the form. In those days, you had to give your choice for your cadre, zone-wise. So I said, what should I write? And he said, listen, we are sitting in UP. UP is a great state. Just write UP. And so I wrote UP. And I found it a fabulous cadre to work with. It's very interesting. UP, many people think UP is a bit chaotic and, it's very difficult to work. And as an outsider in UP, I think, as Dr. Qureshi mentioned, I was welcomed with open arms. And in fact, one of the reasons why they wanted me to go as a collector of one of the Kawal towns was precisely because I was an outsider.
Right.
So there was a perception that you'd be more neutral and impartial. So I had a fantastic time as an outsider, technically, in UP, but I throughout was made to feel like an insider.
Right. And do your children speak Tamil? I think that was Dr.
And I forgot to answer that question. Dr. Qureshi is right. Their Tamil is even weaker than mine.
That's all right. It's a small sacrifice, I think. Thank you both, gentlemen. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. And I'll hold up the 2 books again. Please do read them. And I think for any civil service aspirant, for anyone in the services, this is an absolutely wonderful conversation. Please do listen to it. Thank you very much, Mr. Iyer. Thank you very much, Dr. Qureshi.
We hope you really enjoyed that session. You can find the entire schedule of ThinkEdu 2021 on our website, eventexpress.com. You can watch the rest of the sessions on our YouTube channel, eventexpress.com, newindianexpress.com, and edxlive.com. You can also check out our Facebook and Twitter handles. Thank you for watching.